All right, so Dr. Leon, there's some other things too that we need to touch on that people must be cognizant and aware of, and that's the fact that during the Obama administration, we saw the bailout of the banks from that 2008 financial crisis, and the banks have steadily, emerged out of that decline and that collapse. Now, since President Trump Donald Trump's been inaugurated as president, some may say the inauguration of President Trump was actually a requiem for democracy. But one thing I will say is the stock market. The stock market has hit a record high. It hit 20,000 and it's gone beyond. One thing that I notice, I look at and I do invest. I follow stock trends and things of that nature. There's some things that I think people need to pay attention to. When Trump was inaugurated, and what you see up till now is you saw the spike in the prison industry stock. So this is your CCA, your Corrections Corporation of America, who now have changed the moniker. They're no longer called Corrections Corporation of America. They're changing it to Core Civic to try and put a better spin on who they are. But it's the same people. A lot of people don't even know that Thurgood Marshall Jr. is on the executive board of CCA, the private prison industry. You also have the GEO Group, which is another private prison industry. So their stocks rose when Trump came into office. You saw the defense industry stocks rise. So this is your Boeing, your Lockheed Martin, your Northrop Grumman. You've seen with Bechtel and a lot of other ones, their stocks rose. You saw a lot of the pharmaceutical industry stocks rise. Trump had a sit down with the pharmaceutical heads last week. So there's a lot that's going on. What is your take on Trump, the stock market, and where the American economy may be headed? What's your take, Doctor?
Well, I don't think that it's an accident that we saw and see a continued rise in the stock market. I think it's leveled out a bit. Some are saying that the Trump effect has reached its climax. I don't know that is actually true, but you have a president who ran on law and order. So if you run on law and order and you use the hyperbole that Donald Trump has used, then it's a safe bet to think, not only law and order, but immigration, because when he starts talking about rounding people up, you're going to have some place to put them. So companies like CCA and the other private prison companies, people are figuring, well, that's a safe bet, because as we start rounding these people up and trying to send them back from whence they've come, we're going to need a place to put them. The stock in these companies is going to rise. When you have a president who ran on rebuilding the military, well, then that means that Boeing, that means that GE, that means that the Carlyle Group and Blackwater and all of those, Raytheon, that basically a lot of companies whose ads you see sponsoring the Sunday morning talk shows on our major networks, their stock is going to go up because government money is going to be directed into those companies. And then when you have a president who orders the review of Dodd-Frank, the Dodd-Frank financial regulations, which means that he's going to relax government regulation on the financial industry and other industries, that is going to result in businesses, a better climate in which businesses can engage in business. But the fallacy, and we saw this under Ronald Reagan, George Bush 41 called it voodoo economics. The logic that Trump is using is, as I free up business to do business, as I lessen regulation and make it easier for them to do business, that the money that they make is going to trickle down to the rest of us. We have yet to see that happen. It's a great economic theory, but I always tell my students that you always have to separate the theoretical from the practical. And what I mean by that is there are a lot of things that sound good. As we're sitting around the dinner table or sitting around talking about a lot of things that, oh yeah, that really makes sense. It makes sense theoretically until you try to turn it into public policy. And then once you try to turn it into public policy, you start to understand that the theoretical doesn't always work in the practical application of it.
Right. Right.
So,
right.
Supply side economics, I think, is an example of that.
They say, somebody, I forget who said it, they say trickle down, it doesn't even leave you with a nickel down, but that's...
There you go. There you go.
All right. I want to ask you this question now. What about the potential confirmation of Jeff Sessions for Attorney General? You know, Republican from Alabama, Jeff Sessions. What's your take on that? What's your position on that?
Well, did you see Dick Durbin and his testimony, which was then followed the next day by the senator from Minnesota,
Al Franken?
Al Franken.
Al Franken. Mm-hmm.
Oh man, you know, for those who did not watch it, did you see Al Franken?
I saw Al Franken. I didn't see Dick Durbin, but I saw Al Franken. I watched that from the beginning to the end, and that was
go back
dynamite stuff right there.
If you can go back. Dick Durbin did the same thing the night before that Al Franken did, which was expose Jeff Sessions to be the racist that he is, and they used the record to do so.
Right.
When you listen to the Republicans, such as Lindsey Graham and Cornyn from Texas and all these others, well let me take a step back. When you look at the vote, it was straight partisan. Republicans voted for him. Democrats voted against him. But when you listen to the Republican testimony, all they said was, oh, he's a nice guy. He's a great guy. He's a fair guy. I never saw him do anything that even hinted of racism. Oh, you should hear him at parties. He's a funny man, and oh, we love him. When you listen to the Democrats, they opposed him on principle. They used his language. They exposed the fact that he lied in the way that he represented his paperwork, the things that he wrote in his paperwork. Dick Durbin pulled out the letter that Mrs. Coretta Scott King wrote opposing Jeff Sessions when he was nominated to be a federal judge. She called him a racist in 1982. They presented a clear, irrefutable, fact-based, record-substantiated case as to why Jeff Sessions should not be the Attorney General. And it was brilliant. It didn't carry the day, but it was brilliant, which takes me to two more quick points. One is, there are those who are asking the question, what should the Democrats do now that they're in the minority in both the House and the Senate, and they don't have the White House? Should they oppose Gorsuch? I say this. Do not oppose Gorsuch. Do not oppose anything or anybody strictly to be obstructionist. If you think that Gorsuch's record is decent enough for him to sit on the Supreme Court, then vote for him. If you believe that when you review his writings that there are problems, that he will not be a fair and impartial justice, then you challenge him and you don't vote for him. But you do it based on principle, and you articulate the principle that you're standing on. And this is where I think that the Democrats are making a big mistake, is that they are too engaged in political analysis, and they're not focusing on standing on principle. Because you're going to lose the vote anyway. So all of these political machinations that they're going through are really a waste of time. What they need to do over the next 2 years as we lead up to the 2018 midterm elections is they need to decide what are the 3 principles that we are going to stand on as a party. And they need to articulate those principles every day. And when the administration engages in activity, or when the Congress engages in activity that violates those principles, they need to come out and say, here is why it's wrong, and this is where it's going to take you. And where it's going to take you is a place you don't want to be. Mm-hmm. But when they start trying to play this tit-for-tat political game, they're going to lose because they obviously aren't as smart as the Republicans.
Right.
And the final point is, you've noticed the Republicans are already putting out commercials explaining why Sessions should be confirmed, why the president should get his cabinet. There are all these little commercials that are coming out that are championing their positions. The Democrats aren't doing that. They once again are losing the media war. They are not controlling the narrative. And I don't understand why they can't figure that out.